How's everybody doing? It's good to be on the call, and I appreciate that intro. Um, I just want to start it off because I remember all the time. When I was talking in Primerica, I would always talk about how great of a opportunity it was. And now that I've had about a decade in traditional business and seeing other things and all the stuff that was out there because I mean, Primerica was basically all I knew. I mean, I started when I was 23, kind of fresh out of college, loved it, was obsessed with it, excited, and worked hard, and kind of knew in my heart like this is the best opportunity there is. But now that I've seen everything out there, I just want to come back and tell you. I don't just know it in my heart. I know that for somebody that was like me, that did not have a lot of money to like buy a business, that there is no opportunity in America that will better take somebody from where I was at to where we want to go. There is no better business opportunity. It is unbelievable. And one of the things that just to give props to corporate Primerica. Uh, when I got into traditional business, I loved the people part of business. I loved sitting down with clients. I loved recruiting somebody and helping them be successful. I loved it. And Primerica has set this up so well that 98%. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
good.
All right. 98% of what we do is just the fun stuff. You get to work with other people and help make them better. You can work with clients and help them improve their situation. 98% of what we do is the fun stuff, the good stuff, the stuff that makes you money, the stuff that's enjoyable to help others and to make money. That's enjoyable. What I did not realize getting into traditional business is how boring the rest of it is, how hard the rest of it is. I mean, I can't tell you guys how many hours of meetings I have sat eyes glazed over with either lawyers or software and IT providers. Stuff that doesn't directly make you business, but it make you money, but stuff that you have to do. And so the system here in Primerica is designed so perfectly. And I just want to report from being out in the traditional world for a decade now to come back and say, I hope you guys know that it truly is the best opportunity out there. It really is. I have not seen anything that is as good as this, and that can take somebody, from like I was, middle class, maybe lower middle class, and set them on the trajectory of financial independence. So I hope you know that, and I mean really, really know it. Now, what I want to talk about first, though, is that it's it's an inside job. Success in any endeavor is an inside job, right? Michael Jordan um, isn't the best ever because he was the most talented, but because he was the most mentally tough, right? You can tell he's got a mindset that elevates him over other guys that are just as talented. And so it's no different in business. The mental toughness and getting your mind right is the key to success in really any endeavor. A lot of people I've seen have talent. A lot of people that I've seen that are smarter than me, better than me, even more, even better at people, working with people than me. But if they don't have the right mindset, they're just not going to have success. So some of the stuff that I want to talk about first is that. Number one, you're not as good as you think you are, and you've got to own that. So the biggest challenge I see people do is they get to this point where they think they're good. They think they've got it. They think they've done well. But the reality is I worked, 16-hour days, and it probably took 5 years of 16-hour days with a lot of experience, with a lot of activity, a lot of being in front of people, a lot of booking appointments, and a lot of closing, and a lot of, getting rejected, and a lot of everything before I could really look and say, you know what, you're pretty good at this. And here's why I want to test it, right? Because, most of the time people come in and maybe, 60, 90, 126 months, 20 days, 6 months, they start getting good collecting premium checks, or investments. And they say, you know what, I'm pretty good. Or maybe they're 6, 9, 12 months into the business and they finally double digit recruited, and now they've double digit recruited and they're like, you know what, I'm pretty good at this thing. But here's the judgment, right? Um, can you, at will, whenever you want, build a leg that's got 25 people showing up and doing at least 10 and 10, with multiple people licensed? Can you build a business? Because that's what it is. That's a mini business within your business. Can you build a mini business on command at will whenever you want? That's the question. And if you cannot do that, you're not as good. You're not that good yet. And that's okay. Because the truth of the matter is, we should never get to a point where we think we're good enough, right? It's about the journey, not the destination. We want to constantly improve and constantly get better. But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't grasp is it's not luck. There is a skill and an experience that you can develop where you can build RVPs at will whenever you want, as big as you want. It's not luck. I remember, the first time this idea was planted in me. I heard the DeFeos get up, and they were always great speakers. And they started the speech, and I'm all excited to listen to them. And I'm sitting there, and they started the speech, and they said, and I don't exactly remember the numbers, but they're close, like 168, 83, 34, 8, 5, 3, 1, 1, 1, something like that. And I mean, that was the first sentence of their speech. And I'm like, what are they talking about? Is this some numerology weirdness? I mean, what are they talking about? And they went on to elaborate. That was the amount of directs it took for them to get the next RVP. Okay. So the amount of directs it took to get the next RVP. So many times, people think that finding an RVP or building a leg has to do with luck, or it has to do with the other person. But the reality is, you personally can control the success. Now, do you find people? Yeah, sure, you find them. Do you find them, or do you make them, motivate them? Well, you find them, but here's the key. All right, and my whole point of saying this is, you could, and I also got to a point where I could build a $10,000 leg at will on command whenever I wanted to. That's a skill that you can develop that does not have to do with the other person. Now, I know that sounds like a contradiction. That, I'm saying you find the person, they have to be the right person, and yet I can control it. But here's why. Because of the law of large numbers, because of successfully navigating a market. When you recruit somebody and you get 3 recruits for them in the first week or two, and then a couple of recruits for those 3, and a couple of recruits for those 3, all within a month, you're down 10, 15, 20, 20 people coming in. The point is, yes, you find them, but one of those 15 to 20 people are going to be them. So, I'm saying all this to punch you right in the mouth, right in front, right in the beginning of the talk. I'm punching you in the mouth because I want you to hear me loud and clear. If you cannot build a leg or a mini business within your business on command at will whenever you want, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. And that's okay. We are all in a journey of improvement. The only thing that will keep you from improving is if you think you don't have to improve. That's the only thing that will keep you from growing and getting better, is if you think you've arrived. So, what I want to talk about is, in that process, what does it look like? Here's another thing I want to punch you right in the face, right in the beginning. If you have not, in Primerica, and I know we have people that are, superstar, getting off to a fast start, 90 days in the business, jammed up, ready to go, excited. And then we have some successful full timers that have been around for a little while. and I know that. And so there's, different people at different levels and different time frames. But if you have not in your Primerica career gotten to a point where you were so, let's call it, afraid that you weren't, stripped down, butterball, butt naked in front of the mirror and saying, with this voice saying, what are you going to do about it? If you haven't been frozen by fear in this business, and people that have, they'll know what I'm talking about. There's this feeling, almost like butterflies, I guess, but this feeling that comes right here. Your throat starts to feel a little like dry or sore. There might be pressure in your eyes. I mean, there's such a fear that you're. And if you haven't gotten to that point, just getting to the point of experiencing the fear, much less overcoming it, then you're not doing this business. You're not. All right. There's going to be a couple of forks in the road in this business where you are absolutely shook. And then you have to have the courage to do it anyway. So I want everybody, again, right, punch you right in the mouth right away. If you haven't experienced that, it's because you're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself. And I saw it all the time, especially with the males. Oh, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Well, that's a lot. As a matter of fact, it's even you're so afraid that you're afraid to admit you're afraid. That's how afraid you are. That's how fearful you are. You're so fearful, you're afraid to admit you're afraid. So there is no exception to this. There is no human that comes in and just devours everything that we have to do. We have to overcome so many different things and uncomfortable feelings and getting ourselves to act when everything in us doesn't want to act, and we have to get ourselves to act anyway. That it takes real courage to overcome these things. I'll tell you my experience, and I'll try to keep it brief because there's other stuff I want to cover. But I remember, I was full time from the beginning, but not because like I quit a job. I just didn't have a job, right? And so Mark was training me. He was a great field trainer. I mean, as good across the kitchen table as anybody I've ever seen. And we were out there doing kitchen table appointments. But during the day, I found myself sitting around with my mom. One day in particular, I was maybe 3 months in the business. It was like whenever The View came on, 11 o'clock, my mom and I were watching The View. Well, anyway, no comment on The View, but this was 20 years ago or so, 15, 20 years ago. And I remember thinking, there's no way this is what a business owner, somebody that wants to be a millionaire would be doing right now at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whenever it came on. And so I talked to Mark and I said, hey, what should I do? And he told me about this 3-footing thing. And he's like, what's 3 foot? Well, you talk with anybody that was within 3 feet. So here I am 3 months in, and I'm scared to death. What do you mean talk to people that are within 3 feet? What do you mean? That's weird. That's uncomfortable. I don't want to do that. Right. So I go out to try to 3 foot, and I am shook. I'm talking about scared to death. I didn't want to do it. And, after struggling for maybe a day or two, I remember being out there and I'm like, my fists are clenched. I got this pit in my stomach because I knew that, if I didn't overcome this, I probably wasn't going to have success. But everything in my body was telling me, don't talk to this person. And so, but after about 15, 20 minutes, I went around a corner and I kind of, got near tears. And I just kind of finally, got this anger, courage to overcome that fear. All right, but it kept going on. I mean, and I'm not going to elaborate every one of them, but I remember being afraid of setting appointments at the orientation. A person comes in and I want them to like me. I'm human, so I'm doing an orientation. I want them to like me. I don't want them to quit. But I know if we don't set appointments, he's not going to be or she's not going to be successful, and I'm going to have wasted my time. So I don't remember how many orientations of not setting appointments it took before me to get just stripped down and said, Brett, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to lie to yourself and act like you can still build a business even though no one you bring in sets appointments? Or are you going to figure this out? And so finally, taking the courage to overcome that fear and told myself I'm never going to do an orientation again without setting appointments. And I did, bam, overcome that. I remember being afraid asking for a life insurance check the first time. I remember being afraid recruiting across the kitchen table or asking for referrals. I mean, these were fears that I had to deal with and overcome to get to a point where I could have success. So if you're not admitting the fears that are holding you back, that's dangerous because I promise you they are holding you back. And if you're not bringing it to the front and discussing it with your leaders, your mentors, or even sidelines, hey man, I'm struggling with this. It's so funny because the one that's not admitting the fear, they're the last ones. Everybody else knows you're afraid of it. I can't tell you how many people I'd have, and I would speak in a recruiting, message, and recruiting is the key. There's no doubt. But I'd have some people come in and they'd recruit, 13, 15 people, but they do 1,000 in production. And they're like, "Oh, I'm like you." And I said, "No, no, no, that's not like me. That I never did that. That never happened with me. Yes, I recruited more people than we sold policies, but it was never 1,000. Okay. The reason that's happening, and there's something broken in your business. It's broken because you're not setting appointments with your new people. And if you don't fix it, I don't care if you recruit 100 people, it's still not going to work. It's still not going to work. So you need to overcome that fear at the orientation, or and set appointments with your new recruits. You have to. And no matter how hard I tried, a year or two went by, he never built momentum, and he's no longer in the business. Why? Because he wasn't willing to face that fear. He wasn't even willing to admit he had the fear. Um, but these things are key, and there is absolutely something that is holding you back, a fear that's holding you back. All right. The next thing, and it correlates with this, is we lie to ourselves all the time. We lie to ourselves all the time. One of the biggest ones is I'm not afraid. That's a lie, you know. But we tell ourselves all sorts of convenient lies to to prevent us from doing the things that we know we need to do. I can't tell you how many times, and because this is the serious team, you're at another phase from just getting started. I can't tell you how many people they're starting to get serious. They're making an RVP run, or they're a new RVP, and they come to me and they're like, "Well, hey, when I'm building a leg, how do I know that the leg is built? When do I move on from the leg? Or hey, when do I turn over training responsibilities to my team?" So one of the biggest lies I used to see people make is, here goes a regional leader, and I'm asking him about his appointments tonight. And he's like, "Oh yeah, my team's got 2 appointments." And I said, "No, how many do you have?" He goes, "Oh, well, I'm not doing any appointments tonight." And I said, "Why not?" I said, "Well," and he said, "Because my district or division, I'm letting him do the field training so that he can get experience." That's a lie. You're lying. You did that because you're lazy. You didn't want to do it. You're not doing it so they can be trained, so that the trainer can learn how to be a trainer. You're doing it because you're lazy. You delegated because you were lazy. And so that's a lie that you're telling yourself. And I know I'm starting pretty mean. I mean, I'm calling you guys scared, scaredy cats and liars. So I understand. It's not that endearing of a speech, but I promise you, I'm saying it to be helpful. Okay, because this is what I battled with. And I know it's what humans battle with, right? A lot of times our minds play tricks on us. We can justify just about anything. It's human nature. We can justify it. We can, fabricate it away or lie it away. And here in Primerica, when the price is your financial freedom, setting your family free and your children's children free. It's too important of a topic, to let us lie to ourselves or justify it away. All right. So one of the things that I can't, every time it would come up, a guy, starting to crush it, regional with momentum, and and he would ask me, or he'd say, "Oh, this division is doing an orientation," and I said, "Well, what do you?" Until you're recruiting over 30 people a month, you, the trainer, the top dog, should do every orientation. Because all right, you recruit 30 people, how many people come back for orientation? I don't know, everybody's numbers are slightly different, but let's say it's 20. So what is that, 4 or 5 a week? So you're doing one orientation a day. Yes, that is about as the most productive thing you can do for your business is sit with a new person and get their list or set appointments with them and set, whether it's op guests or interviews or whatever we want to call it, but bringing potential recruits and setting appointments. It's about the most productive thing you can do for your business. There's absolutely no reason that anybody else in your business should be doing that until you're so busy that you can't do it all. And so I hope that resonates, because when somebody's a regional and they got momentum, the thing that gets in their way is this type of mindset, like, oh, I want them to get trained. What? You're not even good yet. What do you mean you want them to get good? You're not good. So so you got to make sure that you never forget it, that even if you're not good yet, you're the best there is. Let me shine the light on me. There was one time he just mentioned I was 24 as an RVP, brand new in a new office, and didn't know what I was doing. Okay, I promise you, I was RVP. I took an RV. I think about a year and a half. Technically, I think it was a year and 10 months, but and I went RVP, and I'm telling you, I didn't know what I was doing. I was not that good. I didn't know what I was doing. But we were running the training, so and I had a regional, and I thought, you know what, um, him doing training would be good. He's got momentum, so I delegate the training to him. Now I think we had an op meeting going on, and maybe I was doing the op meeting. Well, unbeknownst to me, the regional had the same thought process and delegated the training to his division. Well, the division had the same thought process and delegated training to a senior rep. So when I was done with the op and I came back, the senior rep was doing base shop training. And when I asked them about it, they had that same, oh, I was just trying to, like, what? Regional, you're not that good in front of a room yet. What is, why are you even possibly thinking about them getting better when you're not better yet? I delegated it to you. That doesn't mean you delegate it down. Only reason I delegated it to you was I was doing the op meeting. If I wasn't doing the op meeting, I would be doing training. So, we all do this, but we pay such a price for it. You should, you should do everything for everybody until it's no longer humanly possible. That's what you should do. And you've got to have a mentor or an advisory group for you to share the things that you're thinking and saying, because it's those thoughts and those things you're saying to yourself that are preventing you from having success. Because again, human nature is we don't want to admit we're afraid. So instead of admitting we're afraid, we start lying to ourselves. So the regional, instead of saying, hey, I'm afraid of public speaking, which was probably true, as most people are afraid of it, um, instead of admitting he was afraid, he told himself that, oh, I wanted to give the division a chance. Now, you, nobody got better. That he didn't get better that way. His business didn't get better that way. It just didn't. The people that were listening didn't get better that way. So you got to realize that the number one enemy is that little voice in your head that's trying to pretend like you don't have to face your fears and overcome them. That's telling you a justification to turn, the other way. So as we're um, building a business, and I don't think this ever stops. Okay, if it is to be, it's up to me. Like you have to be the best and busiest person on your team. If you want to expand the business and grow the business, you have to be the best and busiest person on your team. Now, even when there was times in my career I had absolute momentum, and I was there 15 years, and for 8 of those years, I was the busiest and the best. I mean, I was absolutely busy. But when my mind got lackadaisical, let's say, and there was a couple of reasons, some of them good. I started getting asked to speak at different trainings, and so I was all over the country all month. Being a guest speaker, I thought I was helping people out, but the reality is, I wasn't that busy building the business. And the reason why I say this was my business grew. And at that point, my business was good size. And we had some leaders, but the reality is my business did not grow if I wasn't the busiest and best person in my business. It didn't. And I would say that now, like if I got back into the business, all right, let's say, it's $1 million code. If I wanted to take it to $2 million, I would have to do the same thing the district, the regional, or the new RVP on the phone would have to do. That never changes. I'd have to get back in. I'd have to build a couple more legs. I'd have to start promoting more RVPs. That's what I would have to do. And that was the case. I remember, I was a huge fan of Bill Whittle. I think he's the best lead. He's unbelievable. And learning his story, he had a business, that got him to, I think, 900,000, maybe 1 million. But in order to get him to he had to go build another one. And that was the Collis Temple, Jason Gills, and, Abram Booty, Bubba, and all that. He had to build a whole new leg. Andy Young built $1 million business in Maryland. But for him to get to the next level, he had to go do it again in Atlanta. So if they, being as good as they are and as big as they are, if they had to do it at $1 million to get to 3, 4 million or 2 million, whatever, then of course I'm going to have to do it. Of course you're going to have to do it. You cannot sit around hoping somebody in your business steps up if you're not. It's just not going to work out. And so, what does stepping up look like? The mindset of a business owner and what they do. I was always big, and I'm talking is daily activity. Daily activity, whatever it is. I never like forced people to have the same daily activity I had. But whatever it is that you think work is, you need to hold yourself accountable to it daily. All right. The biggest mistake we can make, because remember, our minds kind of lie to ourselves. The biggest mistake we look is, we'll look and say, oh, this was a good month. I must have done well. So let's say we made a bunch of money, but this happened. I saw it in my own career. There was weeks I made really good money, but didn't work at all. But there was weeks I worked really hard and didn't make much money at all, right? So unfortunately, because there's a life cycle, you know. Um, RVPs that I promote today, I didn't work today for that, right? I recruited them anywhere from a year to 3 years ago, let's say. And I field trained them for the first 30, 60, 90 days, and, maybe mentored them a little bit past that. So the work was previous to it. Okay. And the fruits came. So, you reap what you sow, but you reap after you sow. And the only way I could get myself to not lie to myself, okay, about work is if I tracked it daily. Okay. If I said I was gonna, whatever work is, okay. And I mean, I can tell you what I did, and it even changed over my career. But whatever work is for you, maybe it's, setting 5 appointments a day, maybe it's, setting 2 1-on-ones and 2 appointments a day, maybe it's making 50 calls a day. Maybe it's, the DMs, social media wasn't quite a thing when I was in, but I would utilize it. So it's DMing X amount of people, or it's whatever work is, you need to track that daily. then it's harder to lie to yourself, because when you look at a week, if you review the week and you didn't do that you promised you'd do for the whole week, then you know you're not working, no matter what the daily lie is, because I had daily lies like, oh well, I had to get the oil change and my haircut, and well, my wife has the whatever it might be, okay, and those things are real, right? But if I go a whole week and I'm not doing what I said I was going to do, I'm not working. I have to, I need to check up from the neck up. I need to look in the mirror and say, you are not delivering right now. Right. At the same time, if I come in every day of the week, Monday through Friday, and I do the daily activity, bang, 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 I'm making, 50 calls, I'm booking 2 appointments and 2 1-on-ones every day, um and whatever it might be, and I do that every week, Monday through Friday, even if I closed nothing, even if I made no money, I can hold my head up high on Friday, Saturday. I put in the work this week. I did it. And if I keep putting in that every week like that, and I build a couple of weeks into a couple of months to a couple of months to a year or two, all of a sudden the results are going to explode. That's how you get momentum. How many people do I see where what they do is they phase? They're like 2 to 3 months, they're working hard. But what's the problem with working hard? You end up making money, right? So 2 to 3 months, they work hard, they start making money. What happens when you start making money? You're like, I got there. So now after that, then they stop working hard. So what happens 2 months after they stop working hard? Well, they're not making as much money. They don't have as many recruits. They don't have momentum. So then what happens then? Now they get, a little pep in their step. They get a little afraid and they say, I got to do something. I got to do something. And so then they start working again for a couple of 2, 3 months, and then they get a little bit of success, and then they peter off. Okay. I wish, because this is the heart, this is the freedom in Primerica, if you can grasp this. And I heard it explained a couple of different ways. I think it was Bob, oh, why am I going to forget his name? Safford. Yeah, Bob Safford, that said it the best when he compared it to a rocket ship. Building a Primerica business, it's like getting a rocket in orbit. All the fuel, all the torque, all the power is basically just getting it off the ground. So 90% of the fuel is to get it off the ground. Once it's in orbit, you don't need much power, right? A box fan could blow it around the world once it's in orbit. But to get it into orbit, it takes a lot of power, a lot of power. And that's what Primerica business is. If you set a daily schedule, a daily activity, and you do it for 12, 18, 24 months, you will get momentum. You will. And once you get to momentum, the business does change. I mean, you've heard it before. And, the first time I heard it, I thought people were lying. Hey, it's easier to run a 50 by 50 base shop than a 5 by 5. And I'm like, that's a damn lie, like, uh, but it is. It is absolutely easier to run a business with momentum than one that isn't. So, and certainly you make more money. So everybody wants that momentum. Everybody wants the prize, the momentum to be SVP with the big base shop. Everybody wants that. It's such a sexy place to be. Um, it's so much fun. But if everybody wants it, but not everybody gets it, why not? Well, because they don't pay the price. Well, why don't they pay the price? Well, either they flat out are lazy, which I don't think. If you join Primerica, I don't think you're lazy. I think what? You're not facing your fears, or you're lying to yourself. You're telling yourself you're working when you're not working, right? Or you work for a little while and then you don't work. Well, again, if the only price we have to pay is to truly work hard for 18 to 24 months to get momentum, then what should you be concentrating on doing? Making sure you can get yourself to work hard every day for 18 to 24 months, and then your life changes. Everything else is white noise. Oh, and I mean, all the, oh, is it recruiting, or is it licensing? Is it do I go wide or do I go deep? And all these philosophical questions in Primerica, and the answer is yes, but really it's white noise if you're not getting yourself to do the thing today that you have to do today. So I was obsessed with this. At the early stages, all the full timers, I knew what their daily activity was. And and it wasn't always the same as mine. you know some people would get some face-to-face prospects, some people would make calls, some people, whatever it was, they turned in the daily activity that they were willing to be accountable for. I turned in my daily activity that I was willing to be accountable for. And then every week on Friday, we tracked who did it and who didn't, because I don't want anybody lying to themselves. If you don't win here, you're going to know why. It's not because Primerica didn't work. It's not because you had a bad leader. It's not because the economy or the environment or the market. You're going to know the reason you didn't win here is because you didn't work. So let me get that on the table right now. You said you'd make, X, whatever it is. Okay. 75 calls a day, 100 calls a day. You said you were going to get 10 names and numbers a day. You said you were going to send out, 100 DMs a day, whatever it is. And here we go 3 weeks later, and you've done it one day out of whatever it is, 15, 18. You've done it one day. See, all of a sudden it starts to switch the mindset, because a lot of people, if they're lying to themselves, they're always thinking the problem is external. Hey, why didn't we run a contest this month? Hey, if we had actually ran the contest from 3 months ago, this month I would have won it. Or the music is not great at the op meeting. They're outward looking. Oh, Primerica should have a product that is whatever, interest only, and and they think the outside is what they need to fix and they need to change. And as a leader, it's my obligation to put it right in front of them so they can't lie. It's not because we didn't run a contest. It's not because the music's bad. It's not because Primerica needs to change the product. Okay. It's because the last 3 weeks you've worked hard one day. That's why. Okay. We're not, like, you can lie to yourself, and you're going to, just like I lie to, I lie to myself sometimes, but I'm not going to let you lie to me. All right. We're going to have it out. You said you were going to do this work and you didn't do it. Until you fix that, there's no reason why we should have any conversation about the music, or anything else, plethora. I remember, as a young punk, um, you know, I mean, I wasn't conscious about it, but I realized that, I was living my life to serve me. Like, I want this good food or this good feeling, or I want this and I want that. And I would try to fix stuff outside of me, mostly other people, but maybe it's an organization or a place or whatever. And hey, you guys need to do this. You should do this, and then, it hit me like a ton of bricks. No, the key to life is not serving self and fixing others. The key to life is fixing self and serving others. And a lot of times people will hear this message and think that it's like, bondage. I'm telling you, you have to work hard every day, hold yourself accountable like it's bondage. But no, it's actually freedom. Because what I'm telling you is, you have everything in you that it takes to be a millionaire, to be financially free, to be an SNSD, to make $1 million a year. Everything in you to do that. You just have to concentrate on you, making yourself better, overcoming your fears. Stop lying to yourself as much. Stop delegating work to your district or division or whatever because you want them to be a better trainer. That's a freeing thought. Because a lot of people come in thinking that the reason they're not successful is the system is against them. Whatever the system is, the school system, they think that they don't have that power, right? And that's a freeing concept. You do have that power. It's not happening to you. You have that power to do the activities and to do the drills and to overcome the fears so that you can have success. So everything that it takes to have success in this business is internal. And so that's why you've got to be obsessed about cleaning up the lies, overcoming the fears. How do I do it? Well, I do it by not lying to myself. How do I not lie to myself? I hold myself accountable daily. I don't want 3 months to go by and I look back and say, why hasn't my business grown? And I look back and it's like, oh, well, I wasn't working. But if I look at it daily and I realize, like, okay, and again, I took losses. I don't want to daily activity. I come out, I work hard on Monday, and then on Tuesday I took a loss. I took somebody from out of town to lunch or something like that, and I took a loss. Okay, but at least I'm not lying to myself. All right, and if that week I have 4 days that are W's and one that's an L, hey, I can get better next week. But I'm on track. I'm doing all right. It's when all of a sudden that you start going 0 for 5, 0 for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row. You're lying to yourself, and so I want to make sure you get obsessed about that. All right, this is not the casino. You're not rolling for a lucky number. You're not picking a card hoping that you get it. No, you're in control. So you need to dial that control down to daily and you start asking yourself serious questions. If I tell myself I'm going to make 50 calls or I'm going to, get 10 prospects, am I doing it? And if you do that, you will have the success in this business that you want. I know we've gotten to 10:30, and so I'm going to wrap it up. But I don't know if there's a question or what you'd like me to do from here, Jason.
I'm reading now. Hey, Brett, keep going, man. You're doing fantastic. If you got some more stuff, just keep feeding us, man. We're hungry. Keep it going.
Well, does it? I mean, do you or anybody else have a question that I should address?
Got a question? No questions yet.
No, he's probably.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll check
ask him if you were to get back into the business today, what would his daily routine look like, and what time frame would he put on that success of his promotions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the first off, and this is, when I say daily activity, I know I hinted at like prospecting, and that is probably the most important, but it's not just prospecting. What time you wake up, what time you get into the office, these are all habitual things. I can tell you that's probably one thing traditional business has better. I mean, NYPO, right? Very prestigious. There's billionaires in the group. And I mean, like, there's not one person that wakes up after 6 a.m. in that group. Not one, and they do some type of morning ritual, whether it's exercise, meditation, cold plunge, whatever it is. Okay. But they do it every day, and then they get to the office early, and a lot of them get to the office earlier than everybody else because they say, hey, I like to get there at 7:30 so that when everybody else comes in at 8:30, I already have some momentum. Okay. And I mean, I'm talking about guys that are billionaires, and certainly, at least 20, 50, 100 million, and they all have some type of daily routine. So I would look at that, too. What time are you getting to the office? Primerica unfortunately lends itself to freedoms. Um, so you have to apply certain accountability on yourself. And one of the things that just doesn't play well is when the leader is sometimes there, sometimes not. When the leader shows up at maybe 9 a.m., maybe 1 p.m. Okay, it just doesn't play well in building a business or building a culture. And traditional business knows that. So to me, having that ritual, having the office culture, holding myself accountable to that is key and important, and that would not change. Okay, that applies in traditional business. I think it applies even more in Primerica. Okay, I mean, you see it now, even with COVID. Everybody went virtual. They're all trying to come back because there's something about the office called. I'm not saying one cannot be productive, virtual. I'm saying when your goal is to build a group of people that go after a common goal, that you gotta have a culture. You have to have dedication. You have to have consistency. So when I say daily activity, I don't just mean the prospecting. I would wake up at 6 a.m. I'd have a morning routine of prayer, meditation, maybe a little bit of exercise, something like that. I would get into the office at 8. It's funny. I don't know much. This is all third party, so could be wrong. But I was talking to a couple of primary colleagues and a couple of Primericans, and they said Willie Naranjo, who's taken this thing to a whole nother level. Like the requirement is even the $1 million earners have to be there at like 8 a.m. And it was explained to me that they almost run it like a corporation. Like there's these floors, they do this, and then Willie's on the top floor. Like almost a corporate type of feel. Is how it was explained to me. And again, I might be wrong. I haven't seen it, haven't talked to Willie, haven't been there. So maybe I got wrong information. But when they said that, I said, well, see, that makes sense to me. Okay. Because there is a dedication, a habitualness, a success that comes from consistency and alignment, that a lot of people miss out on in Primerica. So I would definitely start with that. Now, on the prospecting tip, I referenced it earlier. I know social media and the digital world is a bigger thing now than I was there. I don't know much about it. A couple of my guys called me, and I'm like, you utilize the tools that you have. I mean, if it's a good tool, you utilize it. I don't know much about it, so I can't speak to it. I know even with that, I would still make calls. I know people don't answer the phone as much. So these are some of the differences, especially unknown numbers. Most of the time now, orientation, they say they'll text, they'll get a list and then text the friends. That makes some sense to me. I don't have any experience with it. So I can't necessarily speak to that. As technology changes, some of the methods changes. I'm not like closed-minded. It has to be this way. I'm pretty closed-minded as far as you can't really build a culture if everybody is virtual all the time. But certainly if there's technological advances that help, I would look into utilizing them. But I would also, I would also be making phone calls, and I'd be meeting face to face with a lot of people. So I would do that. Without a doubt, I'd come back and I would get to work recruiting directs in a plethora of ways. I went from my trainer telling me to 3 foot. So like I would leave the office to go to a mall to get names and numbers. I stopped doing that, but I didn't stop prospecting. I mean, if I was out to lunch, I'd ask the waiter, and stuff like that. And so I would do that. I would make calls. I'd probably set a goal to book 10 one-on-ones or op guests a day. So the first, I don't know, 3 weeks to 2 months would be just that. Prospecting to book 10 a day so that guests came in. And my goal would be to recruit, 10 directs in the first 6 weeks, maybe. And then I'd get to work with the ones that were ready to recruit people for them right away. Right away. I've always felt, and I feel strongly about it, the most productive thing a leader can do is the orientation. I know not every organization calls it the orientation, but like the first meeting after you've filled out the IBA, when you get the list, make calls or set appointments, that interaction is the most productive and most important interaction there is. A lot of people don't think that. They think the KTAs are most important because that's what directly relates to money. So, people that are, you know, kind of short-sighted, money motivated, they think the KTA is most important. But when it's a healthy business, the origin of the KTA, you don't just KTA qualified appointments don't just rain out of the sky, right? You have to set them. And so if you take a step back and you're like, all right, well, they're getting set here. So here's what I need to protect. KTs are important. So when somebody, and I've had a couple conversations, somebody's starting to do 30 by 30 and really starting to get some momentum and need some help, or maybe even 30 by 15. Because one of the things I realized is that you want to recruit a lot of people, and the production isn't based on recruits. It's based on field trainers, unless it's all internal consumption. But the field trainer can take the new recruits and set, go on appointments and close. And, one field trainer should be able to bring in 8 to 15,000 in production per month. So if you don't have any field trainers and you're recruiting 30, you're the only field trainer, then, 30 recruits and 12, 15,000 can make some sense until you get a second field trainer, and then it should grow even further and more. Anyway, I say that somewhat as a tangent because when you really do get momentum, people would say, "Hey, I got this, or should I do this, or should And always for me, it was you know Brett Burks has to be in front of people. Period. That I have to be in front of people. Now, if I have so many people to be in front of that I can't be in front of people, I can't be in front of all of them, then it's a if then statement. Orientations were most important. That was the last thing. Never delegate the orientation. Then the next thing was the KTA. That was the next important, right? And then it would be like a one-on-one interview. And then it would be, phone session. Right? Or kind of prospecting. My point is, if I was to delegate anything, it would be the flip of that. So I mean, I'd be doing, I would try to get 10 directs in the first 4 to 8 weeks, and I would recruit under them as quick as humanly possible. By the end, it only took one direct. um, I'd get 2 or 3 recruits for them right away. They'd get a couple, and I turned one person into 15 people like this at will on command like this. Now my goal was to get 25 people showing up, but 30 days after that direct, I had 15 to 25 people showing up at will. So that's what I would concentrate on. To the daily activity, first get to the office early, and then X, whatever X is. I don't know about social media as much, but I would definitely still be making some phone calls, and setting one-on-ones as quick as possible.
That was a phenomenal response to that. I got one more question for you, and then when I'm doing that, so the question that that a lot of people want to know here is, you built that daytime culture, the daytime activity, and that you've always been, and have always trained on growing attendance, rallying people to big events. Still to this day, our good friends Olivia and Jamina. We talk to them, and they say they regularly have, when they have events, they have regionals, divisions, actually get buses and fill those buses out. What was like the conversation that you would have with your teammates on how to rally attendance, how to grow that from, having 2 or 3 people showing up to getting, 15, 20, 25, 30 plus people showing up on a regular basis for that daytime attendance?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I mean, obviously, you sell it and promote it. You make it sound, non-negotiable. But probably from the standpoint of the leader, one of the key things that I see people miss, and just looking back and observing, there's people that recruit people, but they get into the friend zone, where the leader or the recruiter cares more that that person likes them and doesn't quit than they do care that they end up being successful. So one of the things early on, I knew that, hey, you know, we may end up, I recruit somebody, we may end up being friends in a couple of years. I never would say it like this, but this is what my thought. But the relationship that we're talking about engaging in, is most clearly a leader follower, a mentor mentee, a teacher, a student relationship. And there's a difference between a mentor mentee relationship and a friendship. Um, you know, some of my oldest friends, I mean, we can't really hold each other accountable. We would just make fun of each other's mamas or something. I mean, like um, but a leader, there's a couple of things, and here's my advice that I think is a practical, simple one. If you're really trying to lead and help them, then it shouldn't go 2 weeks without you pulling them aside and chiseling them a little bit, right? And so when I talk about there's a fear that you're not aware of, that you're not overcoming, this is one that people are afraid of. This was one God blessed me. I wasn't so afraid of this one, but I was afraid of plenty others. But I know some people are afraid of this. And that's challenging or chiseling somebody, especially if they're only 2 weeks or 2 months in the business. They're scared to do it. They don't want to run them off. They don't want to do that. But I knew early on that running them off that's not a sad thing. Okay. A sad thing is they come in here for 2 years and they could have had success, but I didn't have the courage to tell them what they needed to hear to have success. That's a sad thing. Um, so I knew early on, that I had to pull them aside and chisel them. And so there was, I remember I started doing a training. There was like 16 conversations that I have with every person at some point in their process. And one of the first ones was they missed a training or an op meeting. Look, I'll tell you this: nobody that I was working with ever missed a training or an op meeting without getting a call from me or a sit down from me, ever. All right. Now the first one, and I had like 3 to 4 talks, and it got increasingly more intense. But the first one is I'd call them, and I mean they might have gotten recruited yesterday, and they missed the op meeting after they said they'd come to the op meeting, and I say, hey, we missed you at practice today. Like, oh well, I da 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 da, and I would roll into it. I said, look, I'm not sure what you think's going on here, but yesterday I talked to you about, I can show you how to get financially independent to be a business owner. You said you wanted to be whatever you said you wanted to be. I mean, whether it's make $5,000 a month part time, or make $250,000, $500,000 a year, whatever it is. You said you wanted to do this. I'm just a little confused. Like, my 8-year-old son plays little league baseball. I'm talking about little league baseball. And so he practices one night a week and he has a game on Saturday. So, it's 2 hours on Tuesday night to practice and maybe 2 hours on Saturday for the game. And that's little league baseball. Okay. So I'm a little confused how you thought you were going to get to a $500,000 income, and you're not even willing to give the same commitment that my 8-year-old does for little league baseball. Help me understand your thought process there. All right. Did you play a sport in high school? Or band or anything? Yeah. Okay. Well, when it was in season, again, band or sports, how many days did you practice? Oh, we practice every day after school. Okay. Let me ask you, how many times did you miss practice? Well, never. Or, one time I had the flu. Okay. So what would happen if you no showed, no called a practice? What would coach do? Oh, well, you wouldn't play on the game. Why do you think this would be any different? I asked you yesterday if you could commit 10 to 15 hours a week. You said yes. Did that change? All right. And that's the light one. Then, well, maybe not heavier, but then I started talking about it from a leader's perspective, after a while, especially if they get a recruit in the first week or two. And I say, um, you want to be the leader. I mean, you're starting to build a team. And what do you think? I mean, you said you played whatever football in high school. What if the team showed up and the coach wasn't there at practice? I mean, did that ever happen? No. Okay. So, help me understand why you think that that's okay. Like it's kind of mind boggling to me that you would do that. I mean, of course that's not going to work. So either you have to change your behavior, or what you said to me wasn't right. Either way, there's not integrity. What you're saying, you want to build a business and make $500,000 a year, and what you're doing, it's not congruent. So I look, and here's what I'd always do to kind of say it. Say, look, I want you to know that I really think you have everything it takes to be successful here. I mean, I really do. You're likable, your personality, with your skill set, and with your mindset, and with my experience, my training, we can make a great team, and we can make sure that you have successful here. You really do have what it takes. Now, one thing I told myself long ago was that if for some reason you don't have success, it's not going to be my fault, right? It is not fair. My obligation, my responsibility is to tell you what it takes to have success here. Because if you're anything like me, when I came into this business, I didn't know what it took to be. I mean, I wanted to be a millionaire, but I've never done it. My family never done it. I have no idea what it takes to be a millionaire. I mean, I wanted it, but I had no idea. How could I? All right. I had no idea. So if you're anything like me, so I told myself that I was going to make sure to tell the people that I'm training the truth. Okay. Even if it even if it hurts a little bit, even if they don't like me a little bit, I'm going to tell them the truth. Here's the price you have to pay to get the prize that you want. Now, of course, you're a grown man, grown woman. You have agency. You can decide to do it or to not do it, or to whatever. Like you're in control. But from my spot, and my responsibility is to make sure I tell you exactly what the price is, because I'm not guessing. I'm not like, oh, well, maybe this is the price, maybe it's not. No, I know exactly what the price is. And it wouldn't be fair to you or to me. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I did not tell you exactly what needs to happen in order for you to be successful. You get to obviously decide whether to do it or to not do it. But I told myself I'm going to make sure I let you know exactly what's needed. And so usually with that speech, they open up a little bit, like, okay, that makes sense. So now it doesn't come across as me being a dick as much. But I would pull people aside as the leader regularly. If you don't do that, like if 90 days go by, do you know, like, and you haven't chiseled them at all, they think they got it, you know? And that's crazy, because I mean, I don't very few people worked as hard as I did my first 3, 4, 5 years. And I'm telling you, I wasn't that good until maybe, until I moved to Florida. And maybe not even when I moved to Florida, but maybe 6 months after Florida. And that was like 2007. I joined in 2003. So, I mean, I'm talking about 4 years of a lot of activity, and still I wasn't that good. Um, So, if you don't chisel them, in their mind, they're thinking, hey, everything's A-OK. Well, that's not A-OK. I mean, nobody's A-OK. So, you got to do that. And it does two things. One, it helps them. You're letting them know missing training op meeting is not, it's not like you're going to be able to do that and all of a sudden, look, you're $1 million earner. It's not going to happen. And I think one of the insidious things is like, well, maybe it could. Like, no, it's zero. It's 0% chance. Why put off the inevitable? If that's their mindset, if that's their action, run them off. Because let me tell you, their chance of success, zero. So what might as well have that conversation, because there's zero chance. If they don't switch that or change that thinking, they're not going to have success anyway. So anyway, I would have those conversations, and there was a lot of different ones to chisel people, to make sure they knew that. And what happens is a culture of a little bit more accountability, of a little bit more trust, but also the relationship isn't confused. It's not like, hey, you want to grab a drink? No, it's like, hey, it's a mentor mentee relationship, which is what it's supposed to be. Um, so
That's good. That's very, very good. And then I say we had last question, but this one, since we have you on the call, we got to ask you this. If you look at the people on the call here today, the average age, I would say, was just like you when you started, 23, 24. Many of them being, 18, 19, 20 years old. What, last question here is what would you advise for, young entrepreneurs and agents to build their reputation, build their knowledge, in order to get older people to trust them with their finances and really make that transition from part-time to full-time?
Yeah, that's great. And I want you guys to know something. I'm so jealous of you. To be 23, to be 24, to be introduced to this business. Um, I know that probably sounds crazy, but uh the journey is a lot more enjoyable than the destination. Like I where I erred a little bit probably was I thought, I told others because it's true. I was ambitiously lazy. I'm going to work really hard so that I don't, I'll get financially independent and then I won't have to work. I thought that was the deal, you know. And unfortunately, I got to the point where I didn't have to work. And I can tell you, not the deal. Not the deal. The deal is chasing something. The deal is having a mission and a purpose and getting after it. That's the deal. I've now had success in another business, and there's just something about having a mission and a goal and a desire and waking up hungry that is a better life than you know having your cup full. I'm jealous. So I mean, 23, 24, having this opportunity, it really is, the best thing that ever happened to me. Um, so what do we do? Yes, there's a reality of, a 55-year-old may not trust a 23-year-old financially as much as they would trust a 65-year-old. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some, not all, but some. So one of the things that you know people but the truth is one of the things know it's not age. It's on the surface it's age, but the reality is it's capability and it's consistency. Because I remember saying this story like um you know uh if you're good enough and they know you're good enough, they're going to trust you even if you are 23. So the simple answer, one of the things I'd say is this. All right, I know I'm 23. I know there's, I'm trying to recruit or get clients that are 55. So a couple things I was going to dress a little bit better than everybody, show up a little bit earlier than everybody, and work a little harder than everybody. All right. And if that became my habits and that became my characteristics, people are going to see that, know that, and respond to that. Because ultimately, what people want is someone that's competent. Someone that's competent and consistent. Not necessarily someone's old. It's just that people think that if they're older, they are more competent because they have more experience, which makes sense. That's not unwise, but it's not necessarily 100% correlated. That you can have a 25-year-old that's more skilled than a 55-year-old. And of course, if someone saw that, they'd still want the 25. Like if there's a whiz lawyer, but they're 26, 27, but they're an absolute whiz. They know the law, that's all of it. And then there's 65-year-old, experienced in law, but I got a case to win. I want the whiz kid. I want, and so so that it can be beaten is what my point is. Whatever that age prejudice or whatever we want to call it, it can be beaten. But you need to realize it's a multifaceted thing. It's visual, so you need to dress sharper and stay tight. Um, and you got to show up earlier. I mean, the minute you're young and late, you've already fulfilled their stereotype or fulfilled their prejudice. Already did. You know, he's 23, he's showing up late, done. You know, so you gotta be aware of those things. The next one is if you work harder, and what does that mean? Well, with a 55-year-old client, I want to follow up. I'm going to call him. I'm going to whatever I can do to know that hey, even if I'm not the oldest, I am going to work the hardest for you. Right? You can count on that. And then confidence. it comes, and people can feel it. There's like an aura or a spirit, not of arrogance. No one likes arrogance, but of confidence, of true. When you get true confidence, and I'll tell you this: a lot of times people think confidence comes from success, but it doesn't. Confidence comes from knowing you work hard, and that's where that daily activity comes in. All right. When Monday through Friday would go by and I worked hard each and every day, I was confident on Saturday, even if the results were zero. I was confident because I knew deep down I was willing to do something that other people aren't willing to do. That's where I got my confidence. That's why after a few years, somebody that I thought was going to be a stud leaving didn't bother me as much because I knew I was willing to do what others aren't willing to do to have success. And that makes me worthy of success. It always bothered me in 22, 23, 24. Like, I knew if I wanted more than everybody else I had to do something more than everybody else did. Okay. And so I wanted to be the NBA player. And, of course, like LeBron James or, whoever, I guess we're talking to young kids now. So like, Luka Doncic or whoever, I had to, I wasn't going to be better in basketball, right? I wasn't going to be better at entertainment. So then you get into this business and it's like what even a doctor or a lawyer, right? Because they make more money than most, and but they also went to school for 8 years in the doctor's case, and then 2 years residency, and then passed the board, and so they put in time. The extra money didn't come from a sky. They put in more, and then they got out more. So I knew that there had to be some version of that in this business. And my confidence came when I started doing it, when I started doing the daily activity and winning to it, but also when I started overcoming those fears, the forks in the road that I've shared. Like when I started overcoming them, I'm like, oh, this is where you quit. This is where you stop. Oh, okay. Because I mean, my whole body got numb with fear, and I'm like, oh, this is where they get off the track, and I keep going. So all of a sudden, I started liking that experience because I knew that most people weren't going to overcome that. Most people weren't going to get up when they only have 4 hours of sleep and go make the calls that they tie. Most people aren't going to do that. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh wait, if I am willing to do that and I do overcome that fear that other people aren't going to overcome, maybe I am not only going to have success, but deserve to have success because I'm willing to do what others aren't willing to do. That's why I'm worthy of this success in the business. And that's where the confidence comes from. The confidence comes from knowing internally that you're willing to pay a price and work harder than what others are willing to work. So then all of a sudden, when your income starts going up and theirs doesn't, it wasn't a coincidence, it wasn't by accident, and it wasn't luck. Okay. It was because you paid a price that they weren't willing to pay. And that doesn't make you arrogant. That just means, look, I know I can do it again. I know I can overcome this again. I can work harder again tomorrow. I can do it again. And if I can do it, then that means it's no longer luck or a guess or a hope, but something internal that I can start to bring out to have success. And confidence starts to come from that. And when that confidence, and now you look sharper than the next person, you show up a little early, you got the confidence, you're working harder for them. All of a sudden, people start realizing that. And that's kind of how the experience went for me.